In this video, I'm going to show you 5 common mistakes you're probably making that are sabotaging your underwater photography. But the good news is anyone can fix these, no fancy gear or special lighting needed. You'll learn how to take crisp, colourful photos that truly capture the magic of the ocean. And stick around to the end, there are actually 6 steps. And the last one is the most important of them all. The first mistake we all make when we start out in underwater photography is not getting close enough to our subject. It's really important to fill the frame with your subject to make your subject the star of the show. Whether it's a fish, a nudibranch, a beautiful piece of coral, or a turtle, you need to get as close as you can to your subject so that your subject is the main feature in your picture. If you're using a mirrorless or a DSLR, you get as close as you can with your camera until your camera stops focusing. That is your working distance. So get used to your working distance so that you know when you go to your subject, get your camera as close to your subject, more or less within its working distance, and then start focusing. That way you will fill your frame with your subject. If you're using a TG or a compact camera, you can do the same. You can get as close as you can to your subject and then zoom in. If you're taking a photo of a beautiful reef, get as close as you can. Let your fisheye, your wide-angle lens, or your wet wide-angle lens allow you to get as close as you can to your subject. In macro and wide-angle underwater photography, you also want to reduce the amount of water between your camera and your subject, because water acts like a lens and it diffuses and filters the water between your subject and your camera, and that can create your photo to become less sharp, especially if you're diving in murky water that isn't clear and you don't have good visibility. And that will help you not only fill the frame with the most important part of your subject, and it will also make your photo much sharper. The second mistake that most of us make when we start out in underwater photography is to be too frightened to use a strobe. I remember when I started out in underwater photography, I bought a strobe with my camera, but it just felt so big and bulky that I decided not to use it. But the problem was, when I did a dive to about 25 meters, there was no light and all my photos came out black. So on the next time I did a dive, I put my strobe on and I never looked back. The photos were incredible. They brought back all the colors. The great thing about a strobe is it not only brings back the colors, but when your strobe fires, it fires a sharp burst of light, and in the time that it fires that sharp burst of light, it also freezes motion. So if your subject's moving, it will also help to give you a much sharper picture. I also love using a strobe for macro. It gives you much more detail and edge sharpness. One of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of new underwater photographers, and in fact some not so new underwater photographers too, is not using the right focusing method. There's lots of different focusing options with cameras, and my advice to you is use single point autofocus. It's just one small block, and that is where, when you half press your shutter, that is the point where your camera is going to focus. And for macro underwater photography, you always want to focus on the most important part of your subject. So if it's a nudibranch, you're going to be focusing on the nudibranch's rhinophores, or if it's a fish or a shrimp or a crab, you're going to be focusing on their eyes. And if you allow your camera, using tracking or more than one focal point, allow your camera to decide where to focus, you are never going to get a sharp picture. And what's so great is if you use just that one single point, you can use the joystick or the buttons on the back of your camera to move that point around. So my advice is single point autofocus, continuous autofocus. So that means when you half press the shutter, your camera will keep focusing on that point, and then you press the button. The fourth mistake I see a lot of underwater photographers making is pointing their cameras down at their subjects when they're taking pictures. So my advice to you is take your camera, get eye level with your subject, or eye level, I mean rhinophores or eyes of your subject, and tilt your camera up slightly. What happens then is you get subject separation from where your subject is sitting, so it helps to separate your subject from what it's sitting on. There are times that you can shoot downwards. Some examples are if you're taking photos of wrecks and you want to show the wreck against the seabed, or a shark on the ripples of the sand you're going to turn it into a black and white photo, or even when you're looking down at the shell of a turtle. If you're finding these tips helpful, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more coming to help you skip the trial and error and start capturing underwater photos you're proud of. The fifth mistake that I see many divers doing, especially with wide-angle underwater photography, is not having an anchor or a subject in the picture. I made those mistakes too. I just went around taking photos of the reef, but actually when I looked at the photos afterwards, they were really boring. It was just a picture of a reef and there was nothing of interest in the picture at all. So when you're doing wide-angle underwater photography, find a subject and build your scene around the subject. So for example, if you're taking a photo of a wreck, you'll never be able to take a photo and light an entire wreck. So find something interesting on the wreck, whether it's the gun or a steering wheel or a rudder or a piece of rope with soft coral. Make that your subject and build your picture around that. What you want to do in wide-angle underwater photography is draw your viewer's eye through the frame. You have your subject, which is your point of interest, and then you have a midground. So your midground could be another part of the reef, it could be the silhouette of a wreck, it could be just some fish swimming in the background, and then you still want to add a background. So if you can add the texture of the surface by pointing your camera upwards, or a diver silhouette in the background, it just helps to draw your viewer's eye through the frame. I told you there was going to be a bonus tip, so thank you for waiting and watching, because this is the most important one for every underwater photographer. If you're going to be taking your camera underwater, make sure that you have good buoyancy. Firstly, so that you don't damage the reef. Watch your fins, make sure that you're not kicking the reef. Make sure that you are able to hold yourself still underwater with your camera. So firstly, you don't damage the reef, and also you don't hurt yourself. And that for me is one of the most important things of being a careful diver and a great underwater photographer, is having great buoyancy so that you can enjoy your dives, that people can enjoy diving with you, and you've been able to take amazing photos of our beautiful underwater world without damaging it. And as we say underwater, take any photos and leave only bubbles. If you're ready to take the next step and wondering exactly what gear you need to get started, don't miss my video on the best underwater camera setups. I'll break down everything you need and what you don't to start capturing stunning underwater photos. Click here to watch it now.